to Crypto Clothesline. We're glad to be here with you. Hanging out the crypto laundry. Getting all the crypto info for you. Crypto Clothesline. Crypto Clothesline.
So we already know how Bitcoin should scale.
Bitcoin Satoshi Vision, or BSV, has been fighting its way up while the other Bitcoins fight right
I thought
back.
the whole idea with Bitcoin was that you could fork. You don't need complete consensus. If you don't like something, you can change
Bitcoin
it.
Cash is more centralized than Bitcoin by default.
There are people who believe in big blocks. There are people who believe in
There's just
small
been
blocks.
this huge battle that's happened ever since.
So the reason why I don't like the phrase Bitcoin Cash is it gets confusing. And for language, confusion is
Bitcoin will be like digital gold. It'll be something, of interest, part of the financial universe, but a side
That
show.
is Bitcoin Cash, a scam. Depends on your definition of scam, right? Like, I know, for example, that Craig Wright is a scam.
You can have the most well-developed beliefs in Bitcoin up until 1 week before the fork.
Good morning, Amy Rose.
So, hi, what's happening?
What?
I don't know.
Where are what? Who? The aliens?
Yeah, they're everywhere, BT.
Yeah, well, I've heard your theory on that. I told someone about that the other day, and I'm not going to mention the people that you thought or you've read about who are visiting aliens from other planets who've come to the human form to shake us up a bit. But I really liked that theory. When I talked to some other people about it, they were like, okay. And I realized probably why Amy Rose doesn't talk about it with so many people.
And the fact that no one wants to talk to me about it might have something to do with it. Oh my god, we digress. Okay, so part 2 of the war with Bitcoin, Bitcoin Cash, SV, ABC, etc.
Oh my gosh. I thought it was just BTC and BCH, but now it's BTC and BCH and BSV and B. What the hell?
How can you not laugh about it?
Okay, so community, how to increase adoption, how to stop the infighting and the embarrassing community being united. That's basically what we're looking to talk about this week.
Yeah, so this week is part 2. It's about community, and we're talking again with Lucas Cullen and Lien Truong about the great crypto divide and the subsequent cryptocurrencies that have come from the Bitcoin blockchain, but that are causing a bit of ruckus in the community. We've also got special guest appearances from a couple of other speakers. And so pretty much it's all about community this week. So get excited. It's going to be mushy.
It is all about community, and hopefully we are able to come up with a solution about how we can move from backstabbing and backchatting each other to actually have a meaningful discourse, a meaningful conversation face to face.
Yeah, and you interviewed JP Parker, who was the first guest on the Crypto Clothesline way back when, and she was actually one of the people who helped lay the plumbing for the internet itself. Or did she lay the plumbing for the internet itself? Or was she around?
Oh, no, hang on. She didn't lay the plumbing. She said she was around when the plumbing was being laid.
Okay, so she was around when the internet plumbing was being laid and while everyone was being laid as well.
Oh, God. I think we better redo that bit.
No.
Okay.
But what did you speak about with JP apart from all the plumbing?
With JP, we talked about the fact that there was all these factions, there's all this sort of horrible warring and this keyboard warriorship going on. My actual question to her was from more of a masculine, feminine perspective, not man, woman, but how could we approach this in a way that it doesn't end up in war? Like, how can we create community so that it is actually meaningful and helpful and we can get past our conflicts rather than just using them as a reason to faction off, to split off, and to never talk to each other again, in which, in that kind of arena, nothing much gets resolved. Everybody goes off into their own corners, licks their wounds, and constantly, points the punching bag at someone else. It's their fault. It's their fault. So we were looking at that sort of more mature perspective about how we might be able to do things differently.
Yeah, it's become a little bit high school. Back in my day, I think people just used to go down to the Oval and have fights, but these days they're on their keyboards and they're like typing really hard on their keyboard, trying really hard to get their ideas across, but it just sounds violent, sounds a bit attacky and even a bit bullyish, although most adults don't like the term bully.
You can do it anonymously. I mean, most people don't have pseudonyms on the Telegram groups that we're watching, so we kind of know who they are. And as we mentioned before, there are certain sort of personalities that are very direct and upfront, and they're very opinionated. There's not a lot of soft stuff around the edges, and they're getting really well known. So whether it's a marketing ploy, you know, that good cop, bad cop, there are people coming up in dinner party conversations like, oh my gosh, did you see what such and such said? And that was just crazy. I mean, I guess that's the nature of humans, but it's out of control. And it's not just in the Telegram groups. I mean, I've got a blog that I've started to write, and it's called something like, I would really like to express my gratitude to all those sexist pigs out there. That's the name of the blog, something similar. And that was about the birth of the clothesline for me, where it came from. And there were a lot of these young keyboard warrior types in these really prominent Facebook groups and other groups which are hugely influential. And the way that they spoke to and the way they spoke about, in this case, women, it was just deplorable.
Yeah, but then you've got groups like ours, which is a really nice, I have to say, it's a really nice Telegram group to be in. Has something to do with our admin bot, we call it the laundry bot, and it keeps the place really, really clean thanks to Latitude Blockchain Services, actually. They're the ones who created the bot for us. They're awesome.
We actually got a lovely compliment the other day, didn't we, on our Telegram group going, I just love this group, just saying. I like being in here. Really cozy and comfy. That's it.
Yeah, we don't have hardly any spam posts. I know heaps of groups have these random people from other countries come in and put some spam and some nudity and sometimes porn, but we don't get that thanks to our superhuman, super AI, super bot.
What the bot? Well, it's funny because a few of our cozy members were like, whoa, I can't post. And I'm like, what? Really? What do you mean? I knew there was a bot, but I hadn't quite caught up with technology. I was like, oh my gosh, why can't you post? And it was, yeah, but the bot's good. The bot's letting in the real ones and pilfering out the fakies.
Let's have a listen to your interview with JP.
Let's have a listen. Hello, JP.
Hello.
I am speaking with JP Parker. She's been described as many things, but recently SciTech has called you a Canadian futurist. You're also associated with Enkel here. You're doing amazing work with social impact and helping to organize a huge event that's coming up. So welcome, JP Parker, to the Clothesline again.
Thank you so much. Lovely to be here.
JP, I and Amy Rose, we've been speaking to different people in the blockchain circle in Australia. And for our next two episodes, we spoke to Lucas Cullen and Lien Truong. We were looking at the Bitcoin versus Bitcoin Cash argument, for want of a better word, that has come up. And while we had a fairly civil conversation, what has been perplexing Amy Rose and I is the way that the Bitcoin versus Bitcoin Cash debate / argument seems to be really splintering the Australian community, the Australian blockchain community, and possibly also other communities around the world. We just wondered if you could comment on the state of community and how this disruption happens and how we could do things differently.
It's a really good question, and I've seen this before. And really what it breaks down to, and there's an article by Joshua, I think is his first name, Vile, from Inspiral in New Zealand. Now that's the company behind the Lumio platform, and they've been doing explorations of how we do community in the 21st century for quite a while. And his point is that online media, and I can verify that this is true, is very distancing. And so what he says to do is, if you want to rescue something from conflict, you escalate the bandwidth. That means you go from text or a Telegram group or an email to a phone call, and then from a phone call to a video conference where you can see each other's faces. And then from there, you go to in-person, right? So a lot of what is occurring because we're losing something on the order of 93% of the actual communications that would happen non-verbally if we were sitting across the table from each other. So if these guys were sitting in a pub, this would be a friendly debate. But because of this reduction in richness of the communication environment, it gets down to this very limited way of communicating. and people just get very black and white in it. Now, so this is not unique to the blockchain world, and it's quite common for there to be heated debates. What's, I think, different here is the rapidity with which we arrive at ad hominem in the modern social media sphere, right? Where I'm right and you're wrong, and you're a fill in the blank, or you must be a fill in the blank just to have that opinion. So the essential civil discourse seems to have been affected. Now, this is, like I said, it's not unique to blockchain, to Bitcoin versus Bitcoin Cash. I mean, we've had holy wars in technology. They were this way about Macs and PCs. They were this way about which browser we were going to use, all right? So there's just a great deal of young men in the conversation, or older men with a lot of testosterone, right? It's really just a lot of that going on. So that's just the overarching energy. And from my perspective, it's a phase. We will move past it.
I mean, because that phrase keyboard warrior comes to mind, where people have the courage, or the Dutch courage, or whichever kind of courage we label it, to say things, because it's just the screen and the keyboard, and people are saying things, I think, in a social media context or an online context, which perhaps, as you've referred to, they wouldn't be saying in a face-to-face conversation, or if they would, they'd be quickly, booted out the door probably from the conversation itself.
So I guess the deeper question is, how do we conduct a global conversation with civility? Because that global simultaneous conversation, we're not at a conference. When we're at a conference, it's a whole other environment, right? But when we're communicating online across the world, we've got time zones to contend with. We can't necessarily be connecting face to face. How do we reintroduce civil discourse without just doing the kind of punishing, admins bounce you out, or, make you cool off for a while before letting you back in? Although that's a good practice, I will say. It is a very good question, and it's one we must grapple with increasingly as we become more and more connected, and those connections become more and more complex.
Well, thank you so much for commenting on this. It's been really wonderful to have the perspective of you, our very first guest on the Clothesline. Thank you, JP.
Okay, bye.
I always love listening to JP. She has just got the most reassuring voice and that sense of it's going to be okay.
Yeah, well, you know what? She's been there. She's done that. She's aware of how the tech industry works in these communities and that there's infighting. But in our interview with Lucas and Lien, Lucas does touch on back in the HTML debacle days where, there were two camps. They both wanted separate directions, or they didn't quite know which way to go. And he talks about that in our interview that we're going to be listening to in just a second. But it just goes to show that perhaps, it's not just this industry. It's all industries, and it's innovation. And as people develop and invent things, there's always going to be fighting. And that's, I think, just evolution of a space.
Sometimes in the most uncomfortable situations, which conflict is definitely there, sometimes it just puts a fire up your bum, doesn't it, to actually find the diamond in the rough.
And I don't know, does anything even progress if it's all hunky-dory and smooth sailing? I don't know. I feel like things happen when there's friction and when there's pressure and when there's deadlines and opposition, and competition. I just feel like there's success.
Yeah. But I think we also need collaboration, because you put up that article saying divided we fail. That very clearly demonstrates how, when we're not together, we end up just fragmented. When we end up together and we can cope with conflict and we can manage. I mean, you've got a wonderful saying called mastering the art of confront. And that whole notion of just being able to come together and say, okay, I get what you're saying. This is where I'm coming from. How can we work this together? It's not necessarily a compromise, but it is finding a mature middle road, which actually satisfies to a degree both parties. Or maybe I'm just hoping.
I just think that we can learn a few things out of the sportsmanship book. When you go to a kid's football game or a children's anything game, we teach them to shake hands, to be compassionate, to have good ethics when they're playing competition, take care of your team. And when you're finished, it's all done and dusted. How about you have good sportsmanship and shake the other person's hand? But in our space, it's not like that, is it?
Yeah, I don't know. When you start talking about sport, I just start thinking about steroids and all sorts of sleazy ways people rip each other off. So I'm not quite sure. I mean, I think in theory it works, but I don't know. Sports is one of those areas where people just get so devilishly competitive that they will just do anything they can to knock the other one over.
Maybe you're right. But in the meantime, let's have a listen to episode 2 of The Great Crypto Divide.
That's the best name. That's what I'm going to call it.
So today we have Lien Truong, and she's head of growth in marketing at Hobby, and Lucas Cullen, who's a blockchain developer and the CTO of Civic Ledger, among other things. So thanks to you both for being on the Crypto Clothesline.
Hi, how you doing?
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Okay, so let's go into episode 2 of the Bitcoin, Bitcoin Cash, Bitcoin SV, Bitcoin ABC saga. Now, the Bitcoin Cash community believe that they are the real Bitcoin. Well, that's the impression that I get. Lien, can you tell me a little bit about why they believe they're the real Bitcoin? I mean, they use bitcoin.com, and that is the landing place for almost every newbie. They hear about Bitcoin, they go to bitcoin.com, and they're confused because it's all about Bitcoin Cash. So can you tell us why they believe they're the real Bitcoin?
I think, again, it's really a fight over the name. I mean, having the name Bitcoin at the moment brings a lot of prestige, and it means you can claim that you were the first cryptocurrency, etc. I think that if Bitcoin Cash built a really, really great reputation over the next few years and achieved mass adoption on its own merits and made itself a household name and took the number 1 spot in terms of like market cap, it probably wouldn't want to change its name to Bitcoin anymore, because by then it'd have invested a lot and have built out its own brand. In terms of Bitcoin Cash, the Bitcoin Cash community believing that it's the real Bitcoin, I think that it's because they believe that their coin is the truest interpretation or form of what Satoshi intended when he created the currency. A lot of people seem to be claiming that through their interpretations of the white paper. It's always a huge gray area when it comes to deciphering text in white papers. I think, I can't even make sense of half my husband's text messages, to be honest, so I would be the last person to tell you whose translation of Satoshi's paper is the most accurate. I think it's just they want to be Bitcoin because right now to claim Bitcoin will give them a lot of merit and all the good things that come with that name.
A lot of people believe that a man walked on water 2,000 years ago and put 2 of every animal in a boat. Doesn't mean it was right.
We're getting back to the religion again.
Yes, I'm just going to go in the Jesus camp for 1
Go on,
second.
go there.
I didn't say Jesus, I said a man.
Hey, are you going to, why don't we go down the flat earth? I mean, people talking about the earth being round, but,
B, do not throw me in the deep end.
Well, come on, we can always furnish this interview with practical / not sure examples.
Amy's a superstar host. She'll be able to come out of any deep end.
This is true, and I'm not even want to spend the time cutting out my BS.
Or we can edit it out.
No, we like your BS. Can you speak, Lucas, in bullet points, if you can, why you think then Bitcoin is better? What are the advantages of Bitcoin over Bitcoin Cash? I mean, you've already said you think Bitcoin Cash is just a marketing scam where people can just make an income and bugger off with other people's money.
So Bitcoin Cash is increasing the block size, which it says does have technical merit. What will win is adoption. Okay, so to me, when you say better, that's a loaded question. We have enough battles as it is. We have enough challenges trying to educate people, trying to encourage industry, trying to lobby to government. We need to have a united voice, not a fragmented. And PayPals and the Visas will be laughing at this space right now, saying you can't even get your own shit together. How are you going to take on us? So what will make it better is when we have a united voice and adoption, when merchants aren't confused around what is Bitcoin, which was a hard enough sell back in 2013, 2014. Now that sell is more complicated. So although there might be technical merit, if we don't have adoption, if we can't get payments across, we may as well just go home. And what I believe these chains are doing is creating a divided community, creating more confusion, which will perhaps be the one, shoot themselves in their own foot, fragment the community, confuse merchants, and not have any crypto. Or maybe they'll just pivot to one that's more succinct, like, Monero or Dash or Ethereum. But even Ethereum had their, classic and Ethereum fork. So I don't know, it's really discouraging.
I think it's a really good point you make about adoption. And, as I was saying to the ladies before you came on, I've got to go to an appointment at the airport now to speak to merchants there about, in implementing some systems to be able to accept crypto payments. So hopefully we'll be on the adoption runway, excuse the pun, and taking flight. But yeah, I totally agree with that. I think that it seems like such a simple step. But when you did make that comparison between Visa and MasterCard, it would have been kind of funny to think about the boardrooms where they're like, no, it's MasterCard Cash. No, it's Visa. I don't know, whatever the variations on a theme are. So we kind of need to get our act together and be unified, don't we?
Yeah, or market forces will drive one. So another example for those who are old enough to remember, back way before the internet, we had different network protocols. We had BNC, we had Token Ring, we had Ethernet. Now, because of the Ethernet one, right, we don't run BNC or Token Ring networks in LANs anymore. We just don't. Probably half the people listening wouldn't even know what I'm talking about. But one was a technology because of its ability to go on the internet or be used on the internet, and it just won. So perhaps there will be something that triggers that, and the others will just fade off into the background. But like I said, all these battles have been played out in technology for years and years. HTML, there was actually user groups that decided on what HTML is. And there was one camp that said HTML should be compiled and we should be very strict, just like any other programming language. If you make a mistake in C++, it won't compile. Another camp said, you know what, let's just make it free and open and the browser will pick it up and be able to interpret it. Now, on one side, you have very strict coding and a coding runs well. But on the other side, you have very poor coding like HTML when anyone in Notepad could just create a web page. But that decision to go the later actually saw, in my opinion, an explosion of web pages because they let the reins go a bit and they allowed that freedom of expression. So there's merit in both sides of the argument. That's what people have to understand. And like I said, this movie has been shown so many times. Go back and do a bit of history on some of the technology decisions on the internet and computer science, and then start to bring those conversations to the table.
I'm just a little bit worried. Cryptocurrency means a lot to me, and the divide in the community is really upsetting for me. And that's part of the reason why we wanted this interview, to highlight the disruption that it's causing within adopters already. A question for you, Lien. Do you have any ideas as to how to solve the problem of all of these fragmented communities within the cryptocurrency wider community?
I think that it's one of those things where it's just stemmed from the culture of like the tribe mentality, that you can't have one without the other. Like for myself, it's the Visa MasterCard thing where you can have both. They do pretty much the same thing, but they just market things differently. There's enough people to go around to adopt each one. And I couldn't tell you the difference between Visa and MasterCard, you know, when it comes to speed of transactions or things like that. I find that it's one of those things that because it's not picking up as quickly as it should, like cryptocurrency in general, that sometimes you see projects kind of like, you know, just put the other projects in negative light in order to kind of like, you know, rise above the rest, rather than kind of like concentrating on the applications that they could use and the marketing they can use and all the efforts they can use to make the currency more mainstream. I don't know if the butting of these heads will stop or if one coin will eventually wipe out the others, but I really think it shouldn't matter. I think that it's really positive that we are able to fork and clone coins when we disagree. I find that the unique thing about Bitcoin and Bitcoin Cash is that we're in a space where we can live both truths. For example, if I worked for a company, let's say Apple, and half the Apple company wanted to put wheels on the new iPhone so it can drive itself around, and the other wanted to put propellers on your iPhone so it could fly itself around like a drone, it would likely result in like a vote of some sort where you had to pick one path or the other, or someone at the top in the company would make the decision to go down one path because they only have resources to go down one route. If we ended up going down the path of putting wheels on your iPhone because it was cheaper and easier to execute, then customers would never know what it would be like to have an iPhone that flies around and what it could evolve from there. In the case of Bitcoin and Bitcoin Cash, we're not only lucky to see the evolution of both paths as it, you know, evolves, but because forking is cheap and it's easy, we get to hold a little bit of each and test both parallel worlds. This would be equivalent to if you had the phone with wheels and then Apple decided to give you, you get the flying phone for free because we decided to build it. And now you get to play with both and not miss out on anything. And you get to see how each of these phones evolve to other products. So to answer your question, I think there'll always be competition. But again, we have to remember that the intentions of both communities are the same, to bring that economic freedom to the world. And yeah, just be really aware that the distractions from these fights can hinder progress.
Lucas, do you have any super duper one-liners about how we can deal with this community split?
Yeah, if you don't like it, don't use it.
It's kind of like it or lump it.
Well, like, you're never going to change someone's mind, in my opinion, by throwing stupid one-liners on Telegram, right? It's just wasted energy. Like, oh, mine does this. If you don't like it, just don't use it, right? Just ignore it. Like, I really don't care what Android's doing. I just not interested, you know. There's React and Angular, and I just chose to work in React, and I don't really care about Angular, and I don't really care about half these other things. Like, I'll just choose one, and when it stops working or I don't like it, I'll just choose the other. But making observations or criticisms on the other party, you're not going to solve anything. You know, because someone says, oh, you know, Bitcoin won't scale. No one has ever said that to me and said, you know what, I'm going to swap. It's just ridiculous. Like, the attitudes of the, like, you know, maybe educate and say, well, look, it does this and this, and these are the features we can offer you. That's maybe a better marketing strategy. But bagging the other guy is probably not the right marketing strategy. So I don't know, just ignore the comments and just choose a technology that you like.
I think you made a good analogy about the kids in the playground, and I keep coming up with that, with this notion of somebody sticking their hands in their ears and sticking their tongue out going, nah, 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 nah.
Exactly right.
And the only people laughing is really the banking sector, who's kind of like, they can't even organize themselves and they're acting like children. So it's things like that make us lose a little bit of
credibility.
Oh, I don't know. I think the banking sector's been losing a fair bit of respect lately. I don't know that we've got a problem there. At least our arguments are up front.
But just on that banking...
the High Commission.
Okay, it came out in your favourite mainstream media newspaper that, ooh, banks are corrupt. Big shock there. What did everyone do? They got up the next day, they went to their coffee shop, they tapped their cards. No, not one person closed their bank account because of that, I'll tell you right now. Not one person changed their mortgage. Not one person did anything. Humans are just so apathetic and they don't really care, right? So, you know, the banks are corrupt. They're corrupt because we let them. It's that simple. Until people start changing their behavior, looking at a crypto or something else, you know, I've said this before, if you're not part of that, then you're just part of the problem. It's as simple as that.
Yeah, you made the same analogy with Facebook in our last interview, and I think that's stayed with me ever since. Whenever I go in there with my free marketing, getting my information out, your words do come to my mind. The fact that you can bitch about Facebook and the data stealing, but if you're not moving away from it, then you're not making any changes.
100%.
Lucas, is that not a bit hypocritical? On one hand saying ignore it, and on the other hand saying, you know, make changes, or I guess maybe even be the change you want to see in the world?
Well, like I said, I just choose not to use it, is what I'm saying. So I do ignore it. I change my behavior and don't use it. I vote with my feet. You know, if a Bitcoin blockchain with 0 users is useless. So if everyone doesn't like the technology and doesn't use it, then it ceases to exist, ceases to have any value.
This whole conversation reminds me of an Andreas Antonopoulos video titled "We Are All Weirdos," and he talks about how the fragmentation in the community is actually a good thing.
We are tribal in nature. So we create little in-groups and out-groups, and then as soon as our in-group starts getting very successful, those of us who thrive on being the underdog create an inner in-group within the in-group and call the other part of it heretics for not following the true vision of the founder, messiah, whatever, right? And so you know, the revolution is barely succeeded when the counter-revolution arises from within. And we've seen that happen in Bitcoin. The funny thing is that each wave of this has barely gotten started before it finds that there's another wave right on its back. So it's like the Ethereum maximalists, like, the flippening is going to happen. We're going to do everything that Bitcoin does, only better. And somebody comes up behind them and goes, EOS! Where did you come from? We're the next Ethereum. What? We're trying to beat these guys. And so the cycle repeats. You know, you're not representing the true vision of Bitcoin. We're going to represent the true vision in Bitcoin Cash. And what's happening in a month? Oh, there's an even truer true vision that is now going to fork off the true vision. I have no problem with any of this. this is the thing to realize, which is this is natural. This is a process of mutation, fragmentation, bifurcation, consolidation that is part of the churn of evolution. It is wonderful that we have, in an open source environment, a dynamic, vibrant, ideological environment where people can try out new ideas. And if I don't like the way you're taking the idea that we worked on together, I'm going to pick up my ball and go start my own game.
So, I mean, really, we're going to have a bunch of opposing forces, and we just basically have to choose.
Well, as I said before, the whole premise of this technology is to trade between people. And if people don't trade between it, then it's useless. So yeah, the best way to vote, in my opinion, is just not to use it, to ignore it. Use the technology which you support, and that's the measure of success. That should be the winning formula. Everything else is just noise.
Lien, do you have any predictions about how this will all pan out?
Well, I come from a product background, and what I can see is some technology that's amazing, but I think its marketing, application, and user experience is quite lacking at the moment. And that's probably why it hasn't picked up as much as it could have. With cryptocurrency in general, like if you look at the stats of normal small businesses, they say things like, over 90% of them fail. And these are normal businesses that are using proven technology with proven market. A lot of the ICO projects I've seen that have resulted from ideas that were, in hindsight, way too aspirational because they were playing with unfamiliar technology, and it was, time consuming and expensive to build for an idea that had no proven market. The need and urgency for the product that were pitched wasn't established, and the user experience to adopt the product was too foreign for people to grasp or clunky. I find that that's happened over the last 10 years with Bitcoin. It's not sticky enough. The need isn't there. The urgency isn't there. Because for me, mass adoption comes when a product's, cheap, convenient, and easy to use. And in the wise words of Peter Thiel, it has to be at least 10x better than your competitor for you to jump ship. Right now, Bitcoin may be 10x better in an idealistic sense, but it's not cheaper, and it's not more convenient, and it's not easy to use. So we need to do things to get people on board. And maybe some suggestions would be marketing and exclusivity. We don't have to create new and innovative things that people don't know of yet. We can kind of just look at the markets that we have now and see how we can, get people adopting, just buying the goods and services that we have so far. For example, I think crypto millionaires, let's say Roger Ver, was to, strike a deal with Frontier Touring, who sells concert tickets, and they reserved a bunch of Taylor Swift tickets for those who want to pay with Bitcoin Cash, considering the fact that Taylor Swift tickets always sell out. This will definitely get a bunch of people adopting the currency because they get access to something that they couldn't with their normal fiat money. Or let's say offering discounts if you pay with crypto, because, everyone loves a sale, and it would be great if we had an annual crypto Boxing Day sale where everything is half the price if you paid in crypto. I mean, these are small examples that aren't revolutionary, but they're ones that people are familiar with and ones that foster instant gratification. And I think that's what the general public really want. They won't adopt because we're kind of going, you're letting the banks take control of you, and, do you know that they print money, and in a few years it's not going to be worth the paper it's printed on. That doesn't necessarily touch the pain points of people if it's going to be just that little bit inconvenient to do. Yeah, and I think that's where we need to kind of work. I know that, idealistically, yes, it's the future, and it's amazing technology, and it's the way life should be, but people kind of just, do what they're comfortable and familiar with, and they won't do it until social norms change and people start making them feel guilty about using fiat. But that would take a long, long time to do. So the small kind of instant dopamine hits you get with, you get something for cheaper, or you get something faster, or you get something that you couldn't get with money. That's the way you'd really get people familiar with using Bitcoin as an alternative, a true alternative to the currency, or to fiat.
So keep giving people little rewards, and then people will be incentivized to jump on board and learn more about it, or to experience, or at least to dip their toes in the waters.
I don't know if people necessarily need to learn more about the way Bitcoin works and the technology behind it. I mean, I don't, I swipe my credit card and I have no idea the technology behind it. I don't know what happens after. All I know is I trust the system, and it works, and other people are using it and they trust it, so I should trust it. and it was easy and it's more convenient for me. And that's all I care about, you know? And I think that everyone who tries to tell people that they should use Bitcoin always really start from the banks are evil and this and that, and which is true. And there's so much proof out there. It's just people are kind of like, oh, well, you know, it's not really bothering me that much yet, or I'll do it when it starts getting easier to do. And I think if we start looking at just as any other product, the way any other product markets or builds itself to make it more user-friendly and more convenient and cheaper and faster and whatever it is, that's the angle that will actually get mass adoption.
Lucas, would you agree with that with respect to the future of cryptocurrency, that perhaps it is marketing and making it easy?
I generally agree. I mean, marketing and making it easy is always a good thing. But I think, until there's a compelling reason for people to change, unfortunately, people just won't. Like I said, people are apathetic. Tap and go is a very convenient and good technology. And now, with Apple Pass. So on a brick and mortar merchant level, it's probably going to fail. But as an international payment system, it's, I believe, far superior. But the majority of people just want to, buy their coffee and tap and go. So it's back to really what is the utilitarian, like what is the use case of Bitcoin? Maybe it's not for, like I said, average shopping experience. Maybe it's more for online e-commerce or international payments.
All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us on Crypto Clothesline. It's been fascinating to listen to the two of you today, and it didn't get bloody and gory. I was a bit worried that it might. So, we look forward to creating this episode.
Thanks for inviting us.
Yeah, thanks a bit.
Well, there we go. That was part 2 of Bitcoin Cash versus Bitcoin.
And JP did mention that there might be a solution, but there also might be a winner, someone who, according to Lien, is the best marketer. Or maybe, according to Lucas, there might be someone who has the best solution. So there might be something that allows people, or that allows the particular currency to be the absolute peer-to-peer currency. At the moment, we're a laughingstock.
Yeah, it's interesting the way that Lucas talks about, the fact we're the laughingstock of the banks and we can't get our shit together and all of that. But I don't know, we've just come through the Banking Commission and I don't think they'll be laughing too much at us now. Seriously, I think they'll be, trying to cover their own tracks.
Oh, look, I'm not denying that we're amazing and crypto isn't like the bee's knees, but they might be thinking we're a little disorganized and maybe not focused.
I don't know. We did a presentation just last week at the Fremantle Chamber of Commerce, and we had 3 bankers in the room. One of them was really, and they were all representing different banks, 2 of the big 4 and a little small community bank. I don't know if bankers are giggling or not. I think there's still a lot of them. It's very different to talk from the corporation to the actual people who work, from the corporation to the people who work behind closed doors. And a lot of those people are like, wow, how can we marry these 2 worlds? I know that sort of almost sounds like you're going to bed with centralization, but I still think that the people behind those bank sliding doors need to actually know what this whole crypto world is about and why it could be posing such a challenge to the way that things have always been done.
Well, I hope you're right, because I would love for them not to attack us and to think that we're doing really awesome, cool stuff, because the last thing we need is for a bank to come out with a centralized cryptocurrency. Well, that's my opinion anyway.
Amy Rose, we have been invited to open a bank account. It wasn't from one of the big 4s, but this is for another business that we have, and it has crypto in the name. I should have learned. But up till now, we haven't been able to open even a MailChimp account. Like MailChimp is still refusing us. So we have no way of gathering email addresses and stuff. So silly. And because of crypto in the name. And but one of these 3 banks extended the warm welcome for us to go and open our account with them. So things are changing. But
what bank was it?
I believe it was the Bendigo Bank, and it's a small community-based bank, and it's got that approach of, was it Lucas Cullen who spoke about that in the interview? Another interview specifically we had with him, but he was saying that not all banks are the same, and that there are banks which are based on serving the community as opposed to the big multi-corporate.
Yeah, I think that's something that Lucas would have said. And, it's right, not every bank is the same. And you know what? They might not be laughing at us, but I'm laughing at us because it is a bit ridiculous. And I don't blame anyone who has a look through their community and thinks, what the hell is going on?
Well, who is the last person we've got to listen to before we wind up this episode 2?
Yeah, so I had a mini interview with Hayden Otto, who is very well known in the crypto community as the Crypto Cash guy. And he's very vocal about his opinion on Bitcoin Cash. Now, what we do see when he's involved in a conversation on Telegram chats is there's a lot of arguing and a lot of fighting. And he does say very, very clearly it's not bullying. Okay, that's his opinion. It is definitely not bullying. However, from an outside perspective, it's definitely getting a little bit too heated in there.
I just think in general, some of these fellas just need to learn some good manners, really. Just to be able to give people space to have their opinions without being blasted or sworn at or accused. There's some really accusatory tones and weird stuff going on in some of those groups.
I used to say to people, if they didn't have Telegram and they were wanting to get involved in the crypto space, I used to say, come on, get Telegram, what are you doing? And now I meet people who don't have Telegram and I'm like, I've got regrets. And sometimes, I think, oh, maybe I should never have gotten involved in the crypto space. It's just getting so ugly.
No, the crypto community needs you. You're such a peacemaker. Well, you're not necessarily a peacemaker. You've got quite clear opinions, but you tend to just try and sew things together instead of just, kicking people up the butt.
Yeah, I guess, but it's not the funnest thing in the whole world. It's a little bit negatron.
Well, at least we're having a conversation about it in this way and in this context to sort of throw light on it, not, just instead of just seeing the kids fight it out between themselves. It's like a group of teenagers, isn't it? And you're like, I'm just going to close you all in an iron room and whoever comes out alive wins. Like, at least we're sort of trying to be kind of more motherly about it and to kind of look at it with an overview and discuss things. Let's have a listen to Hayden.
Let's do it. Thank you so much for joining us today, Hayden Otto. You're the executive editor of CoinSpice and you are a very well-known supporter of Bitcoin Cash, and it seems to be your whole life at the moment. Welcome.
Thanks very much. I'm happy to chat anytime.
So Hayden, what I've seen, we're in a lot of groups together. You know a lot about Bitcoin Cash and you're often defending your position. Can you tell me a little bit in like a couple of sentences? It's going to be really hard. What is so amazing about Bitcoin Cash?
Well, it's not just Bitcoin Cash that I know a lot about, because I was actually involved in Bitcoin way before Bitcoin Cash existed, and I also use Bitcoin still nearly every day, the BTC version, and I've also used the Lightning Network extensively. Anyway, I am not the greatest fan of the BTC version of Bitcoin anymore, and the reason is because people have thrown little bits of sand in the revving engine that was Bitcoin, and it hasn't been as great as it used to be when I first got into it. So there was many problems that came as a result of that, like high fees. They were generally unpredictable to change on a daily basis. You'd have to go and Google what the correct fee to pay was, and it was just really annoying. And also then the transactions were unreliable. Sometimes you had to wait days for them to clear if you do not put in the right fee. And as a result, many more users like myself have taken a similar stance, or aligned their assets to support a version of Bitcoin that is trying to be a global currency, global payment system.
And how would you say that the adoption rate is going in Australia, considering that's where we are at the moment?
Well, when I first got into Bitcoin in mid-2016, at that time, Bitcoin was widely accepted online. I remember I could use it on Steam to purchase games, which Steam is the most popular game platform on the PC. That adoption has been going negative, but since Bitcoin Cash came into existence, the adoption has been expanding there rapidly. Particularly in Australia, we have the highest adoption anywhere globally in Australia per capita.
So you travel the country from what I see, and you promote cryptocurrency adoption as a peer-to-peer electronic cash. A lot of people, particularly in northern Queensland and other places, see you walking around encouraging people to use cryptocurrency as a payment. So what has troubled me is the fact that we all in the cryptocurrency community would love to have mass adoption of whatever cryptocurrency. Well, not whatever, but
Something that works. right?
Yes. And then in the community, in our own cryptocurrency community, you appear to get bullied. Do you agree that there's a little bit of...
I wouldn't call it bullied, but I would say attacked because I'm right over the target and I'm a threat to the existence of this convoluted system that BTC has turned into. And when I point out a lot of uncomfortable truths, these people get really defensive.
Do you enjoy being part of the cryptocurrency community compared to when it was just the true believers back in the early days?
Well, I don't have a problem with other coins, first of all, and I don't like vaporware like the Lightning Network. There's no point in really trying to save these ones who are refusing to change their mindset. It's just a waste of time. And yeah, great strides have been made in adoption as a result of just focusing on spreading adoption.
Well, thank you so much, Hayden Otto, for joining me on the Crypto Clothesline and talking about Bitcoin Cash.
No worries. I appreciate you inviting me on here, and maybe you want to come on CoinSpice sometime.
Well, that was a quickie. That was good.
Yeah, and look, he does say it's a waste of time trying to save people, and I'm just going to throw it out there. I think that he's probably right, and it's a good idea if he does focus all his time on adoption, because it's not going to change anyone's mind. All the arguing is just a waste of time. So, yeah, we can actually do better without arguing and bickering. We have a place there where we can spend our energy on something more productive.
No, and I'm actually amazed at how many physical hours are spent on Telegram spitting back and forth at each other. Like I was like, far out, man, this has been going on for 3 days. I don't know about you, but I've got kids to feed and, blogs to write and people to see. They must waste a lot of time is what I'm trying to say, trying to convince the other party that they're right.
So this is the last episode of the season 2. Our next season starts on the 27th of April, and it is going to be the money season.
We have got the money season, and in season 3, there's some super, super interesting people that we've spoken to. We decided to explore money from all sorts of different aspects, from the classical idea of what money is to perhaps transacting in things like intangibles like love and honesty and authenticity. And we've looked at it from so many different side. So it's a pretty interesting season, quite left of center.
Another we have Andreas Antonopoulos, who will be joining us for the money season as well. We have a Venezuelan podcaster who's going to talk to us about life after a financial crash and whether or not crypto is actually playing a role in the reconstruction of their financial system.
Well, she's a friend that we've made over there who's a fellow podcaster.
Yeah, so we basically travel all around the world. We speak to a South African, we go to the US, we speak to someone all the way in Africa.
We have an Australian doctor speaking to us from Miami. We've got all sorts of different people. We've got lots of wonderful thought leaders here in Australia as well. And in the meantime, have a wonderful couple of weeks. We're going to have a little wee break, and we will see you on the other side. See you in the money season.
See you in the money.
Yeah. Bathing in it, baby. Bathing in it.
Bye.
Bye.
Here comes the money.
Here we go.
Here comes the money.
Join us for the money season on Crypto Clothesline Podcast, April 27th, 2019.